So we can start. Welcome everyone. My name is Selo. I'm a professor at Wits University at the School of Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for joining us. This is our fourth webinar session for this month, where we've been running a series of webinars celebrating Women's Month and also having a look at some of the issues that are facing the mining industry, especially where women and also diversity is concerned. So we've had a lot of fabulous speakers over this past few weeks, and this is our fourth talk. It's our fourth talk, and we've still got one more to go next week. So thank you all for those that have been joining us from the beginning of the month and those that are still with us today. We really appreciate it. And before I start, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Implats, that has sponsored this whole series, this whole month. So we're really, really appreciative of their support. So today our talk is actually, we're going to do it, things are slightly different, but the topic really of our talk is we're looking at a growth mindset, a key to career growth in the minerals sector, and that we're going to have a bit of a talk with the Mpumi from De Beers. But the structure today is going to be slightly different from what we've been doing in the past. So Mpumi is going to give us a bit of a background in terms of a journey in the mining sector, from where she started up to where she is today. And then after that, we're going to have two young professionals that are going to have a chat with Mpumi on a number of topics, which we are hoping that with the discussion, we are going then to also have to get a bit of an understanding of how De Beers is also working in terms of the issues of diversity and gender and also inclusion in the mining sector. So we hope that we can get an understanding and a bit of insight of how De Beers has managed that particular aspect, which is very, very important in the minerals industry. So to start off, I'm just going to give a bio of Mpumi, introduce her, and then also introduce the two young professionals that are going to be having a chat with Mpumi. So the bio, Nompumelelo, known as Mpumi Zikalala, is the Managing Director of De Beers Group Managed Operations, which includes De Beers operations in South Africa and Canada. Mpumi joined De Beers Group as a chemical engineering baser in 1996 and has filled a number of roles in the organization, both in mining and rough diamond trading. She was previously the Deputy CEO of De Beers Consolidated Mines. Mpumi is a member of various boards, including the De Beers Consolidated Mines, De Beers Canada Incorporation, Anglo-American South Africa, De Beers Global Site Holder Cells, and Peregrine Diamonds. She has previously served on various boards of external companies. So we're really, really privileged to have a chat with Mpumi today, and I hope all the participants are going to also gain a lot from her experience in the mining industry. Then we are also going to have the two young professionals who are going to have a chat with Mpumi. The first one is Refense Molehe, who graduated with a degree in metallurgical engineering, honors in engineering and technology management, and is currently a master's candidate in technology and innovation management, all from the University of Pretoria. She has been working in the mining industry for close to 5 years. She was Miss Grand South Africa 28 runner-up. I would actually like to know what that means. She is the founder of Boss Babe Conference, founded in 2016, which is hosted annually as a celebration of Women's Month aimed at empowering women from various fields. She currently has her own YouTube channel where she shares personal and career development tips to assist individuals in living an international life and continuous growth in their career. Then the second panelist will be Wesley Banda, who is currently a research engineer working in pyrometallurgical research at Mintech and holds a BSc in chemical engineering and an MSc degree in metallurgical engineering, all from VES. He has 5 years experience in project management and execution at different scales, i.e. pilot plans for process demonstration and laboratory scale for early research development. He is currently working on research around titanium-based products development and production. He has special interest in change management and building a sustainable workplace, and currently chairs MinPass, Mintech's professional association, working with different channels within Mintech to achieve common goals. He is a council member and treasurer of the SIMM Young Professionals Council, YPC, and EXA mentor, and is a fitness nut, and is also active in participating in and organizing park runs. So these are going to be our panelists that are going to be talking to Mpumi. So now I would like to take this opportunity to give over to Mpumi to give us a bit of a background in terms of a journey, and then from there, the young professionals are then going to have a discussion. So I would just maybe just also point out that after the discussion, there will be an opportunity for all the participants to also pose their questions to Mpumi. What I would request for you to do, please, is to pose all your questions under the Q&A tab. There's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screens there. So pose your questions there. Please do not pose them under the chat panel because we might miss them. So please ensure that you post them under the Q&A tab. Thank you so much. I will now give over to Mpumi to just take us through her presentation.
Thank you so much, Prof. And let me just check. I think I need to find the best lighting, and I will assume that everyone can see me and that they can hear me very clearly. Prof, I think first and foremost, I just need to say a big thank you to SAIMM for the invitation. I am a very proud metallurgist, and I will talk about my journey in a little bit. And I always say to people that you go back to what it is that essentially helped you grow within the industry. And for me, that is part of, I guess, firstly, I call myself a miner, but to be fair, I started off as a metallurgist, but I'll get to that in a little bit. And then to Refense and Wesley, I absolutely love young people. I think they keep all of us young. So I'm looking forward to the panel and just interacting with you. I firmly believe in the power of young people and the fact that they clearly need to grow. And to be fair, I have quite a few of them in my circle or my network. I'll talk about networks in a little bit. And I think it's very important to, on an ongoing basis, interact with different people that have different backgrounds simply because you get to learn and grow through that. And then the other thank you is to Implats, Nico and the team. Thanks for clearly sponsoring. So ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm just Mpumi, and I'll share a little bit about my journey. I don't think there's a lot. To be fair, I think I'm just like every other individual that started within the mining industry and had the opportunity to learn and grow through learning from others. I've been in the industry for close to 20 years, and I always start off with safety. So I will start off with the safety share. I can't start anything without essentially getting into that space. And what I'd like to share with you today, particularly seeing that we are, I guess, living in unprecedented times, times where clearly all of us are learning to live with COVID, is just a couple of things around this. I've heard of a lot of people, particularly with us having gone through the lockdowns, talking about the fact that their lives have changed and that they've essentially found it tough during this period. And I'd like to encourage you to remain positive, because if you try to essentially remain positive, then you will be able to pick up on some of the positive learnings that I believe all of us can pick up just when we look at the trying times that we are living in. And then linked to that is the element of emotional well-being, which frankly encourages all of us as individuals, and it's linked to us being positive, but to remember that we still have a very bright future ahead of us. So let's remain positive and also be on the lookout insofar as other people are concerned and encourage them, especially for those that have been struggling as we've been learning to live with COVID. So thank you, Jackie will drive the presentation for me, and Jackie, you can go straight into the first slide. So I think just like any other, I'm not gonna say young person, I'm over 40 now, and I stopped calling myself young when I went over 40. As I said, I've got young people in my circle, and they remind me that over 40 is not necessarily young, although I have to say that I've got a young mind and a young soul. So I come from KwaZulu-Natal. I grew up in 3 areas of KwaZulu-Natal. So firstly, my hometown, Vryheid, It's a small town in the northern part of Natal, very close to my heart. I learned a lot, and I'll share some of those learnings in a little bit. The second ones, or the last two, are villages that I spent quite a bit of my time in as I was growing up. So firstly, they are both in KwaZulu-Natal. One is Bergville, also in the northern part of Natal, in a village called KwaMahambehlala, which is where my father was born and raised. And then the second one being my maternal grandparents' home, Wanongoma. The reason why I mention this is because clearly it will be very evident Vryheid is a small town. The two are villages. So I've always, I guess, grown up in small places and I actually quite enjoy them. So where other people would look forward to the bright lights of Johannesburg, Cape Town, New York, you know, Canada, Toronto, etc. And I've been to all those places. But deep down, I remain just a person who grew up in small towns and who absolutely loves them, which I suspect is what has assisted me with regards to falling in love with mining. Because you guys, I think, would know that unfortunately mines are not in Cape Town or you know, close to the sea in Devon. I would have loved to have worked in those mines. They tend to be in areas that are a little bit more remote, and you've got to have a fundamental belief in the fact that you want to form relationships with the areas where you work. And I seriously think that the moment when you switch that on, that essentially assists you with regards to growing. So that's where I grew up. I'm the fourth daughter to my parents, and I've got a younger brother. And being the fourth daughter, we used to joke growing up that when my first parents, so they are Zulu parents, you know, got my elder sister, Nozipo, they were like, yay, you know, here comes our daughter. The second girl, Nokanya, they were like, yay, here comes another girl. Third one, Nogwazi, they were like, we wanted a son, but shucks, we've got another daughter. So when I came after my sister, Nogwazi, my sisters joke with me and they go for me. They were thinking, oh, come on, another girl. And then there's a gap between my brother and I, an 8-year gap, which assisted me as I was growing up with forming a bond with my father. And frankly, working outside in the garden with him, changing tires with him, and getting in touch with other things that typical young girls would not have been doing during that time, which I suspect assisted me with switching on an element that said I actually always wanted to do something a little bit different from what other people were doing back in the days when I was growing up. So I went to school in Vryheid, and I went to a high school that's very close to my heart, Inkamana High School, boarding school, also about 7 odd kilometers from Vryheid. And that assisted me a lot with regards to learning to be a little bit independent. So I'm sure that all those of you that went to a boarding school would say that those, I guess, that space of your life or element of your life assisted you with regards to becoming a little bit independent. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a doctor. And I'm not sure if I would have made a great doctor, seeing that I'm a little bit scared of blood even today. But I wanted to be a doctor up until I got to matric. In matric, a couple of career scouts from Anglo-American and DBS came to my school. You guys, I think, would identify. So I grew up in Vryheid. I spent most of my time in villages. And to be fair, when I was in matric, I did not know what engineering was. So the career scouts came to my school. They told us about engineering. And I remember a couple of things. They said, one, engineering was difficult, so a difficult field of study from a university perspective. And secondly, they spoke about the fact that mining specifically did not have a lot of females. And during those days, you guys would understand they were looking for more historically disadvantaged South Africans to join the mining industry. But what I guess raised an element of curiosity and an interest in my mind was the fact that mining was different. And having grown up in a home with my older sisters and always being a little bit different insofar as me spending more time with my father, that clearly got me hooked. I then changed from wanting to be a doctor, and I firstly wanted to be a mining engineer. My father was not too impressed. You guys would understand, I'm over 40 now, so during those days, you actually listened more to your parents. So I then had a look and then changed. And ultimately went to Wits University. So I'm very proud of Wits. It certainly gave me the edge. And I hope that for those of you studying at Wits, it's essentially giving you the edge, or has given you the edge. So I went and studied chemical engineering at Wits, a wonderful period of my life. I formed wonderful lifelong friendships during the time. And those are networks that I still utilize even today. During vacational work in December, similar to what I'm sure most of us did, for those of you that are working, I used to go to the mines, so got to spend good time at some of the mines. I spent some time in gold mines, so some time at Western Deep levels. And for those of you that are in gold and platinum, I have to say that I struggled with Fanagalo simply because I've just always been different. So I really didn't understand why we weren't, even at the time, working towards getting into a more inclusive space and driving for something that was going to be shaping the future of our industry. I also spent a little bit of time in some of the diamond mines, so West Coast mines and Namaqualand, Kimberley mines. And then when I finished at varsity and graduated, I then started off at Cullinan Diamond Mine as a young, bright metallurgist. And I have to say that when I started, similar to most metallurgists, I started off working shifts. And it was an interesting period because clearly coming out of university and having a degree, one would have expectations around what it is that you will do. And I felt for the first couple of months that, you know, shucks, surely there should be more that I should be doing. And I wasn't as responsible as I most probably should have been back then. And I went through a period of learning a very important lesson that shaped me to the individual that I ultimately became within the industry. So clearly, being a young metallurgist who was thinking, yeah, this is a little bit of a waste of time. There was a soccer game, for those of you who are my age or slightly older would remember. There was a soccer game where Orlando Pirates and Chiefs were actually playing. It was a game that was in Johannesburg. I was supposed to be on shift. I was supposed to be working night shift. And a friend of mine actually said to me, as he was knocking off from afternoon shift and I was going into shift, he said to me, Mpumi, I'm going to the game. It was an evening game. So I said to him, shucks, I'm going to shift. And he said, you know what, talk to your supervisor. Your supervisor will cover for you. Come, let's go to the game. And I went to the game. And the first few minutes of the game, so firstly, I went to the game. I didn't have a ticket. So we jumped over fences to get into the stadium. That's number one. Secondly, the first few minutes of the game were actually absolutely fantastic. So there was a song at the time. It was the Who Let the Dogs Out, who, 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 who. And I remember singing that song. Yeah? And I remember clearly the couple of goals that were scored during the first few minutes of the game. But I also remember I was luckily on the one corner of the stadium, but I remember looking at the second corner or at another corner of the stadium. And I remember things becoming more and more quiet during that time. And I remember bodies being carried down simply because people were passing away. So there were too many people who were irresponsible, similar to Mpumi at the time. And people were squashed and people were suffocating. And ultimately, quite a few people passed away during that game. And what went through the back of my mind at that time was a couple of things. Number one, nobody knew from my family or my friends or anybody close to me that I'd gone to the game. I just had a conversation with a colleague of mine who was my friend and gone to this game. So I thought at the back of my mind, what if I had been one of the people who had unfortunately passed away during that game? How do I think my family would have felt like? The second thing that I then thought about was, what about work? Nobody from the workplace knew that I wasn't there except for the supervisor who was covering for me on the day. And I actually thought, Mpumi, why did you do this? I thought back to where I come from, a small town and a couple of small villages. And I actually thought, surely this is not the type of person that I want to be. And I decided there and then to differentiate myself from the rest and let go of things that people would enjoy irresponsibly and become more serious about myself. What also happened on the day is that the friend of mine had a car. We had both just started. He had a car, I didn't have a car. So he had said to me, Mpumi, we'll drive together and then we'll go back to single quarters. On our way back, driving back, he decided that, you know what, he was tired. He had a little flat in Pretoria. And he decided that he didn't want to drive back to single quarters at the time. And I seriously felt that I'd compromised myself by trusting somebody else without really asking too many questions and just I had put myself in a compromised space. And I hope that, especially for young girls, that you never essentially put yourself through that space. Luckily, nothing happened, but I have to say that it was one of the most uncomfortable nights of my life. So you would imagine that I spent quite a bit of time reflecting. I decided to be more committed to what I wanted to do. I decided to start living a more purposeful life. I decided to be a born-again Christian, by the way, during the time as well, because I decided that, frankly, I needed to focus on what it is that I wanted to get to in life. And I decided that I wanted to actually grow within the mining industry, and that for me to grow, I was going to have to work a little bit harder and a little bit smarter and become significantly more focused on what it is that I wanted to do. Suppose that life continued, became an ore processing engineer. I absolutely enjoyed that time, got to do quite amazing projects. And one of the few that I got to do was a secondment to the Hatch offices whilst doing some design work, which is a space that I really enjoyed. And then went into leadership roles as well, so middle management roles, and absolutely enjoyed what I was doing. Funny enough, as part of my reflection, I had thought about the fact that I actually studied chemical engineering and not metallurgy. So I went through a little phase where I thought maybe I need to go into the petrochemical engineering space, to Sasol specifically, and actually get to do what I had studied. So design chemical reactors and distillation columns, and actually enjoy what vets had taught me. Somebody along the way, and that individual got to become a great mentor, then said to me, Mpumi, before you go to Sasol, why don't you go and assume a role of being a technical assistant to the then chief operating officer of our company, so the company that I head up right now. And I then thought, you know what, shucks, I'm still going to go to Sasol, but let me just take a little bit of a detour and go to head office and spend a little bit of time in there. And that particular space, and I started off being a technical assistant to the chief operating officer, and then that extended to the CEO's office, was absolutely wonderful because it opened up my eyes. So I had spent most of my time focusing on metallurgy, design, process improvement, which were wonderful things and work that I absolutely enjoyed. But that space gave me a taste of other things that sit within the leadership space or the holistic leadership space insofar as our industry is concerned. So I spent quite a bit of time with accountants, and I guess got triggered insofar as commercial thinking is concerned. Spent quite a bit of time with corporate relations team and got to understand the importance of the other pieces of work that we do. So the importance of what it is that we do with our communities and how we communicate with our workforce. Spent quite a bit of time with our corporate finance and business development teams during the time, and got to understand that, you know what, this was actually an industry that was full of possibilities. So coming out of that technical assistant space, I got exposure to various areas and also utilized that space of my life to build networks, because that office clearly gave me access to a whole lot of people. So I just started building the networks, and I knew that those networks are going to help me in the future. And then when I finished, the CEO at the time said to me, what do you want to do? Do you want a head office role? And I said to him, actually, no, simply because I felt that I hadn't really finished everything that I needed to finish insofar as our operations were concerned. And I understood that there was still more that I still needed to learn from an operational space perspective. So I decided to go back to the operations. I firstly went to an old operation that we had, a small mine called the Oaks mine. It was a small mine with very few people. It was in a farm. And if you wanted to get bread, you essentially had to drive 18 kilometers to go get a loaf of bread. So you guys, I'm sure you would understand that it actually got me to interact with the small community that we had. And I got to understand the beauty of what it is that you can learn from each and every individual that you spend time with, be it the farm workers or whoever else it was. I actually enjoyed it. And then when the general manager, who was at Kimberley Mines, wanted to move, I was honored to be asked if I could go to Kimberley and lead that operation. It was a smaller operation, so we were treating tailings resources, so not too heavy on the mining side of the business. And my answer was clearly yes. I'm a very curious person. If there's something new, I'll raise my hand and I'll go, shucks, I think I can learn from this. So my answer was yes. And the picture that you see, the top picture with the ladies behind wearing the blue overalls, is one of my favorite pictures, because I got to work in Kimberley Mines. And that is when we started introducing more and more females within our business as De Beers. And what I absolutely loved about Kimberley was, firstly, the people that come from Kimberley. Kimberlites are wonderful people. But secondly, it was the team itself. It was a wonderful team. The young people that came in and joined us brought in a different sense of energy. And as I was still, I guess, enjoying Kimberley, and I started that role when I was 27 years old. So I was, I guess, a little bit young when I went into the GM space. When I was still going through that, we went through the global economic crisis, which was a very difficult period. Although I'll talk about the period that we are going through now, I think it's actually worse than what we went through in 2008 or end of 2008. So we went through the global economic crisis, and that yet again was an eye-opener for me, simply because I hadn't had exposure insofar as transforming or seriously transforming the business in difficult times was concerned. So what that period taught me, and I worked with the wonderful EXCO team, I still call them my team, and I still touch base with some of them, was the essence of leadership, and the fact that ultimately leadership is not about you, it's about others. And if you start thinking a little bit less about yourself and more about them and want the best things for them, then frankly, delivery will take place and you will grow as a result of that. But you will grow as your team grows as well. And you'll get the personal satisfaction of actually helping others realize their dreams as well. Following Kimberley, I went to Voorspoed Mine, and that's the picture that's sitting at the bottom. So Voorspoed Mine was a wonderful mine, open pit operation that actually had its fair of challenges. So when we started Voorspoed, we decided as the business that we wanted to employ young people. So the average age at Voorspoed was 32 years old. And we had young people. The youngest person was the Tlogonolo, who was 19 years old. And what we prided ourselves on was the fact that we had young people, and clearly there was a buzz within that operation. But we went through a difficult period because we clearly didn't have the gray-haired individuals that had actually seen some of the things taking place. So we were forever learning. So at Voorspoed, we brought in a couple of older people. And when I touch on inclusion and diversity, you'll understand that I've actually lived through this. So I've played on the multiple extremes, and ultimately landed in the space that says it's not about the either or, hey? It's the beauty of the end, pulling different people together. That's what gets you to that magic. So I enjoyed my time at Forcefood. We brought in some gray-haired individuals. The individual that's in the picture is Charles McDonald. We brought him in from the Oaks. He came in to essentially assist us turn the mining space around. And I absolutely loved that period of my life, loved staying in Kroonstad, another small town, and loved integrating with the community that we had at Kroonstad. Post that, I actually wanted to move out of diamonds. I wanted to move into another part of our Anglo-American business. But the lady that's sitting in the middle picture, who's wearing the black and white top, Vada Shine, was heading up our diamond trading business at the time. And she had met me during one of the visits at Forcefood. So she said to me, Mpumi, please come and join the midstream business. This is the space of the business where we sort value and sell rough diamonds. And clearly this is the space where we interact with our customers from a DBS perspective. Initially, I wasn't sure. And what then got me interested was Vada telling me, but Mpumi, this is something new. You know, aren't you always telling me that you are a curious person? Just imagine what you will learn. So I then moved in that part of the business, and I have to say, absolutely enjoyed my time within that business. It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about customer centricity. It taught me a lot about pitching up as a leader at a different level. So clearly, I was not a miner. Then I was interacting with our multiple customers, be it our South African customers, customers in Botswana, Namibia, and customers in most of our trading spaces from a diamond perspective, and that's primarily India, includes a little bit of China, the US, which is the biggest market insofar as diamonds are concerned, and you know, the likes of, I guess, Belgium from an Antwerp perspective. And I learned a lot from the individuals that sat within that part of the business. One thing that I did not lose during that time, and I guess it's the beauty of being an engineer. So I'm a chemical engineer, I'm a process engineer, I'm a process thinker, and that's what vets helped me with a lot. And I guess that's what London Business School, I went to London Business School for leadership development, assisted me with. It's the power of, I guess, the brain insofar as thinking is concerned. So what I took into that part of the business was not me trying to know diamonds, you know, so I say to people, if you give me a pile of diamonds and say, Mpumi, value them, I will say, I don't know how to value them. I am an engineer, and I've always been an engineer, but I'll always say that I know wonderful people who can value them. And I'll say what essentially, I guess, engineering helped me with was the process thinking that says that you can go into any space. You know, you can go into banking, you can go into manufacturing, mining, etc. And the thinking that you have assists you with regards to understanding the process and continuously saying, how do we improve that process? And frankly, it assists you with integrating at a significantly higher level and pulling in other parts that you need to think about. So I spent a good 4 years, or just over 4 years, in that part of the business. And then coming out of it, I moved back into DBS Consolidated Mines as the Deputy CEO to my predecessor, a gentleman who was my mentor for a very long time. And then when he moved on, and that was, I guess, the second quarter of last year, I was honored to be appointed in my current role, which is the role that I currently hold. And it's a role that essentially is the managing director of our managed operations. And these are operations that sit both in South Africa and Canada. And I guess maybe one thing to share around that space is that before I assumed my role, I had only ever visited Canada once. So you can imagine, as soon as I was appointed in the role, the first thing that I needed to do was to clearly sort out my visa for Canada. And I started working with our Canadian team, and I absolutely love the team, similar to, I guess, the love that I have for our team in South Africa. So if I look at it, I guess there's a couple of things that have assisted me throughout. Firstly, it's the learning or the lesson that I learned when I was, I guess, a young metallurgist in training, just around the need to be focused and know exactly where you want to go as an individual and clearly work hard towards that. And most of my colleagues will tell you that I'm a workaholic, but it's simply because I always work on making sure that I'm very clear about the what I essentially would like us to achieve. And I then become focused and make sure that things that are not going to be helpful, and those are things that other people may find appealing, but particularly things that I think are essentially soul destroying, don't necessarily feature a lot and haven't really featured a lot. The second part for me has always been around the how you show up as an individual. So I'm a very curious person. You will see a couple of smiles. I am always smiling. Thanks, Jackie, on the previous one. Thanks, Jackie. So on the previous one, this is me in a mine. I absolutely love mining. I love small towns. I love mining communities. And frankly, they speak to the essence of, I guess, the way I grew up. And I guess if you show up to people and you show up in a positive manner, then funny enough, people will reciprocate. People will want to interact with you. People will want to add you to their networks. And frankly, with that, you will find that you will tend to grow through that. Jackie, you can go to the next one. Thanks a million. And then just a couple of things that I guess I've learned from a mining perspective, and I won't go through each and every single one of them. Hey, I've learned that you've got to define your boundaries up front. So people tend to treat you in a manner that you would like to be treated. So I am a woman, I am a lady, I don't swear, I don't shout, I don't scream, but I am very firm. But I'm firm in my own way. And when I was a little bit younger, I felt the need to do it similar to other people. But over time, I actually learned that I needed to be true to myself and not compromise on what it is that defines me. And clearly linked to that, and I'll touch on it when we talk about inclusion and diversity, I always say to people that there are no friends with benefits in mining, and there shouldn't be. And there shouldn't be any friends with benefits in leadership as well. So you don't need to feel that you've got to offer certain benefits to others to get to a particular space, particular things that you're uncomfortable with. And then secondly, I have to say that if I've got a view, I will share it. So I absolutely loved, and this is the last story that I'll share. So when I was, before I was the deputy CEO, we've got a couple of farms that we own as a business. And my predecessor, we are very good friends, used to invite me hunting. And every year I used to feel like I needed to say, sorry, Philip, I'm busy with something, and this is why I can't come. And then the one year it suddenly dawned on me that I wasn't really true to myself. I have never had a desire to go hunting. So I then had a conversation with him and we actually laughed about it. So I said, Philip, but look at me. Do you think I want to hunt? Like, I don't want to hunt. So please don't invite me hunting. I can invite a couple of my team members to go hunting with you. So I say to people, there are things that clearly I enjoy doing. It doesn't mean to say that I don't network. I network, but I try to help make sure that as I network with people, I don't lose myself simply because, you need to essentially know who you are and what you are comfortable with. And if you continuously, essentially, as you network, make sure that you protect the part of you that should always be protected, then frankly, you will still grow. Hey? The other lesson that I learned is that I compete with myself. So people normally talk about female leaders and they say, you need to compete with the men, raise your voice, shout and scream. And I say to people, if you do that, then you lack ambition. Set the goals for yourself. And clearly there may be similar goals to what males would set. but please go about it in your own particular way. Don't try to be somebody else. And the last one that I will share is that whatever happens, you should never play the blame game. So internal locus of control is very important to me. So when something happens, I introspect a lot. And introspection means you don't look at others and what others may have done, but you say to yourself, how could I have contributed to this? And how can I essentially learn from this particular space? So these are some of my learnings. I have to, however, say that I've absolutely enjoyed being in the mining industry. I have learned a lot from a whole lot of wonderful people, some of whom I still talk to even today. And I continue to learn all the time, particularly, believe it or not, in today's times from younger people, because young people tend to spark fresh thinking. And I always enjoy the element that says that one should never get into the space where they think that they know it all. So I think, let me just, Jackie and Prof, stop there for a little bit and see if there are any questions. I have a video, but I think I will share that video towards the end. It's a video that gives an indication of what our business is all about, but let me stop there.
Thank you so much, Mpumi. That was really a very wonderful talk, very inspiring indeed. And I must say, I even took notes. So that tells you how really inspiring your talk was. And I guess being a professor, we are so used to taking notes all the time. So really, I think it was really, really great, and we appreciate that. I think we just have got a few minutes now for our young panelists to ask you a couple of questions, and then after that we'll also take questions from the participants. I think I see there's quite a few questions also that we need to go through, so we might go a bit over our time. So I'll ask Refenswe and Wesley to put up their questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, Mpumi, so much for a detailed and very thorough sharing of your experience. I think for me, it's so great to actually hear people share details to how they started and how they ended up there, instead of just saying, once upon a time I was an engineer and all of a sudden I'm a managing director. So I really appreciate the details, and yeah, there's more logic to it. So, but we just have, my first question that I have for you is that what are some of the barriers that you have observed that prevent especially young people in the mining sector from actually growing in their career? So what kind of barriers mentally, or is it skills, or is it lack of ambition? What would you say from your observation stops us young people from actually growing in our careers in the mining sector?
Thank you so much for that reference. I think it's a couple of things for me. So I always say to young people, you know, when somebody gives you something to do, never ever think that it is too small and not worthy of your time. And to be fair, I fell into the trap when I started as well, because I thought, you know, why am I working shifts? Surely I've studied at vets, it's given me the edge. So really now. I suspect that for young people, when they get given things that they believe they should not be doing, they frankly don't give it their all. And unfortunately, when you don't give it your all, people who are looking at you will look at you and say, Refense can't do the following. Because if you fail in the smaller things, believe you me, people will not entrust you with the bigger things. So for me, I think the key one is look out for those opportunities. And sometimes they may be things that you don't want to do. But when you get given those particular things, just excel. Adopt a mindset that says, I'm going to excel. It doesn't really matter what it is that I'm asked to do. One, I'm going to accept it with a smile, even if inside you are frowning. And secondly, I'm going to excel. Secondly, be curious. You know, there's nothing as good as talking to young people who are curious. And I mean, I know it with our team. There's a couple of young people that we have in South Africa and in Canada that if anybody asks me to volunteer a couple of young people, I choose them. And to be fair, it's not just linked on performance, it's linked to how they show up. They are curious, they've got energy, they've got drive. You know, they are those young people who don't necessarily come to you to just complain, but they offer solutions as well. So I think a huge element is, firstly, I'm not going to lie and say that the systematic barriers are not there. They are there. But figure out how you still set yourself apart, even with those barriers, because different young people show up differently. And then I guess the last thing that I'll mention is, you know, people talk about your adaptability quotient, which talks about agility. Hey? So are you agile enough? So I think continuously question yourself, and curiosity takes you a long way, because if you just tell yourself that, you know, from an attitude perspective, I'm going to be positive, etc. One thing that I'll say to you is that even when you face those systematic barriers, you will deal with them in your own way. And I guess for me, that's what defines different people. They just don't show up in the same way.
Okay, thank you for that. A question that would sort of follow from that discussion that you just shared is, at times you find that there would be some mental barriers that you want to, well, overcome. And as much as there can be physical barriers within the working environment, there's also some of them where you don't feel like you're good enough and so on. So how did you overcome some of those mental barriers? And most importantly, what are some of those barriers that you experienced on your journey?
Thank you so much for that, Wesley. I love your company. I used to sit on your board. I think the first one, and I think it's linked to the previous one, is that there's expectations and then there's reality here. So the first one for me is where your expectations are that A, B, C, D should be happening, and reality gives you E, F, G. Hey? It's quite difficult sometimes to actually get through that, particularly when you see other people thriving, when you think that, you know, but why am I not there? You know, what has this person done to get that? And why am I not essentially getting what they are getting right now? And I'll go back to it. You know, life will deal you with the cards that it will deal to you. But how you respond to that is a choice. So for me, what I've always tried to do, Wesley, is to surround myself with a good circle of friends. And I learned that following, I guess, my first couple of months in mining, when I decided that I needed to focus. So I started surrounding myself with friends that were not going to say to me, oh, but Mpumi, you know what? We agree with you, Chomi, this should not be happening, etc. I started surrounding myself with people that frankly pushed me. And sometimes I actually felt that they were not being fair to me, but their role, and I mean, we made a pact amongst ourselves as friends, was that we were not going to lie to each other, but we were going to push each other around getting ourselves to shift our mindset and continuously look at learning opportunities and not complain as much. Wesley, I won't lie and say to you that it's easy, but that's where you tend to want to surround yourself with people that can help you. And mentors and coaches are absolutely wonderful people. So I had one instance where one of my then mentors at Cullinan, I mean, he had a discussion with me and I knew that it was unfair. And I remember going to the loo and crying and thinking, but shucks, I mean, this is difficult, this is unfair. But coming out of that, you know what? I washed my face and told myself that I know exactly what I want to achieve. So I'm not gonna allow that to distract me from what I need to do. I'm going to remain focused. And what assisted me was the conversations that had taken place, funny enough, with the same mentor before. We still get along even now. And then secondly, the friends that I had who reminded me. So they were like, so what? you've hit a stumbling block. Everybody hits a stumbling block. What are you going to do about it? It's a choice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Mpumi. But then now, what advice would you give graduates who are entering the mining industry in building their career development? How should they go about it? You mentioned mentors, but what other approach can we take in actually building our career or developing it rather and structuring it?
Thanks, Rufence. I think that's a good question, hey? I think firstly, going in, be open to learning. So don't say to yourself that, you know what, UP has taught me this, so when I start within a work environment, this is exactly what I should be getting, hey? Be open to the fact that it may be slightly different, simply because first and foremost, being open will allow you to learn, hey? When you start off, be curious about what it is that happens in that space, and don't judge, and don't start boxing things and saying this one's not for me, this one is for me. The moment when you start doing that, unfortunately, you stop yourself from learning. You just box yourself. Very quickly identify a mentor or a coach, and that needs to be somebody that you absolutely trust. Because it doesn't help if it's a person that you don't trust, because you'll go to them and they will say to you, Rufence, how are you doing? And you'll be like, oh, everything is so perfect, Mpumi. You know, everything is going well. I'm loving this. Whilst deep down, you'll go and you'll tell your friends, I actually absolutely hate that. So even if you are assigned a particular mentor, if you feel that you don't have the ability to open up to them, look out for somebody else that can help you. Simply because having that safe space to go to, and that safe space where you can be open and honest about everything that you're going through, will assist you with getting the right support. And good mentors are not the ones that will give you questions, that will give you answers, by the way. They are the ones that will ask you questions that will channel you in the right direction, because what they will be doing is they will be helping you with building your own muscle and helping you with building your own resilience, which is something that you'll need going forward. And then I guess the last one that I'll mention is particularly at looking at today's age, especially if you come into mining, the technical space remains important. I mean, even now in my role, when I sit with my team and we talk about the business planning process, and we start talking about what it is that is happening with the stripping ratio at Venetia, I can't say as an engineer that I don't know that. So be open to learning within the technical space, and always ask the questions that spark fresh thinking. Because I think the wonderful thing that young people have, and maybe I'll talk about COVID, I say to people, COVID is unprecedented. Nobody has ever gone through COVID before. So any experienced older person who says, oh no, but we've tried this before, would be lying to you when it comes to COVID. None of us have dealt with it. So COVID is a great equalizer, because any idea is worthwhile from a COVID perspective. Now, utilize that same thinking for the workspace and always ask those questions. So don't just sit and say, oh, okay, so Mpumi has told me A, B, C, D, and just accept that. Ask the questions, be curious, and say, but Mpumi, I don't understand. I mean, what do you mean? And say, but you know, all engineers today talk about technology and innovation. So what are we doing in this space? And even when older people say to you, whew, but we've thought about that, it's going to be expensive, etc., go spend time with other people and then come back with fresh ideas to spark fresh thinking. So I firmly believe that, I mean, young people are more important today than they were ever, particularly as we shape our industry into the world of the future. It's gonna require people who can spark fresh thinking. And that's exactly what young people do. Yeah. So it's about the mindset as well.
Sorry, it's for me to jump in. We've got quite a lot of questions from the audience, quite a lot actually. So I hope, if you don't mind, if we can go over a bit, because the webinar was supposed to be 1 hour. So we'll have to go a bit over because we've got quite a lot of questions. And I think some of the questions are very, very important. And I think it would be very good to hear from you in terms of some of the questions that have been asked. So I don't know if Wesley and Refenso can also touch on some of the questions that have been raised under the Q&A for Mpumi to respond to.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So actually, the question I wanted to put across, I noticed was actually one of the first from George Dallas. And the question basically is saying that resource companies to date have been characterized by fresh mining supply, implying remote locations and frontier working conditions. Changing the mindset to include recycling, renewables, and synthetics opens up new talent opportunities, in brackets, resource engineering in addition to geology, mining, and metallurgy. So is this vision too far, Mpumi?
Thank you so much for that, Wesley. And George, great question. I remember George is one of the individuals that I learned from as I was growing up. I think very relevant question, George. And I mean, especially when you start talking about the renewable space. So you would know that at the moment, the coal industry gets a whole lot of questions, who clearly question that particular industry and the manner in which we actually generate electricity as a country, just around the weather that is actually good for the environment or not. So I think where your question's highly relevant, George, is that, and by the way, I don't think that it's too far, and I'll tell you why. So if you start talking about remote working, think about it. All of us would never have thought that we can actually do what we are doing right now had you asked us this question in January. I myself, if you'd asked me in January if I could work from my house, my study, you know, and I've been working in my study since the 26th of March. Yes, I've traveled to the operations, but outside of that, this has been my area of work. I would have said to you, yeah, we'll get there someday, but sure, there's a lot of things that have got to happen. Ooh, we need to have a look. Even though there's fiber, you know, we still need to do more work around that space. I think, George, COVID has actually taught us that we most probably used to become our own stumbling blocks just around the manner in which we think. So one, I think renewables have got a space. I think the drive for green, energy has got a huge space. We cannot think about that. I think when one starts looking at the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals and start looking at the goals that are particularly driving for protecting the natural world, you can't ignore them, particularly if you are in the mining industry. If you ignore them, you lose touch with society and where the whole world is going to globally. And particularly when it comes to our space, which is diamonds, consumers want to know how their diamonds were recovered. So you can't say to them that, you know what, shucks, we destroyed a lot from an environmental perspective as we were doing this. Guess what? Consumers will not want or will not desire diamonds, and as a result, we won't have an industry. So I suspect that general society is pushing us towards that space, George, and that it's not too far. And for process engineers such as ourselves, and I'm clearly still a process engineer, I think we'd be short-sighted if we said that there wasn't a space. The challenge that we have is how should we be getting there quicker? And frankly, the people that are coming into the industry with that kind of thinking are people that will assist us with regards to advancing significantly faster. And we need them.
Thank you, Mpumi. I'm just gonna combine Innocentia and Gav's question. So Innocentia is asking, what is the biggest mistake you have done in your career? Which is similar to what Gav is also asking, where he's asking, what would you have done differently as well in your career, and what would you expect your employees to also do better, I guess, from your lessons?
Thank you so much, Innocente and Gag. So firstly, I spoke about one of the mistakes that I made when I was a little bit younger. And frankly, I'm a firm believer that you need to at least talk about the mistakes that you've made, and that's the only way you can grow as an individual. So, I mean, I've made lots of mistakes. I think, so firstly, when I was still a young engineer, part of the reason why I wanted to leave Cullinan and go to the petrochemical industry initially was because I felt that I worked for a leader who I thought was most probably, I'm trying to find a nice word. So I felt that his leadership style just didn't resonate with me. He's a friend of mine, so let me stop there. And hindsight's always the best side. I shouldn't have done that. I should actually have given him feedback there and then. Because years later, I got to know him, you know, when I started working with him as a colleague, and actually figured he's a great colleague. And had I given him that feedback way then, I would have benefited from it. So I spoke about the fact that, one, you shouldn't hold back what you think. You need to be able to talk freely, simply because if people understand what you think, then you'll figure out that sometimes the thoughts that you have in your own head are absolutely far from what they think. And you'll figure out that you are actually the one at fault. So I feel that I should most probably have given him the feedback then. And then I think, secondly, when I started at Kimberley Mines as a GM, I started off thinking that IQ is more important than EQ. And come, let me tell you, as you grow in leadership, you very quickly realize that that's not the case. So my leadership style prior to that had always been based on, you know, having the brightest mind and, you know, shucks being the one who will resolve all the issues and. And when we went through the global economic crisis, what I learned during that space was that leadership is not just about the I, it's about the team. The team is always bigger, always bigger than the individual. And the moment when the individual think that they are bigger than the team, then know that you've got the wrong leader. So I learned that mistake as we went through the global economic crisis. And to be fair, it helped me a lot with regards to shaping my career, because even though I used to think that, you know, I used to listen before, I started listening to understand and not to answer. Even though I thought that, you know, before I used to treat people well, I learned that it's not about the how you talk to people. It's, I guess, people know whether you're being genuine or not. You can say all the beautiful words, but they'll read it. They'll see it if you're not being genuine. So I learned a lot about the need to be more authentic as a leader and show up differently as a leader. So I'll share those mistakes, but to be fair, I've made a lot of mistakes. And the key one for me is you've got to continuously learn from your mistakes and introspect a lot.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I noticed that there's a few questions around mentorship, so I'll just combine those as well. First one is from Divo. So basically they want to find out that as a coach or mentor, how do you keep young professionals interested in the mining industry? And to add on to that, Nothando was wondering if you actually do have space for mentorship.
I'll start with Nothando's one. The answer is yes. So what I have learned, Nothando, is that there's something called reciprocal mentorship, and we actually talk about that within our business. So believe it or not, I learn a lot from young people as I mentor. So I say to people, spend time with young people, they'll keep you young. And if you get young people to share their thoughts, you know, and without worrying about being judged or anything, you actually pick up a lot. So I guess if you ask me about mentorship, I'm a firm believer in mentorship and coaching. I don't think that you can grow without it. And I think you need to find yourself an individual or individuals that you trust and that you can be open and honest with. Share where you are vulnerable and what's making you vulnerable, simply because if you are open and honest within that space, then they will help you with regards to essentially growing. That's in the personal mastery space and the leadership space. But you also need to have mentors within the technical space, because clearly when you start up, there are things that you just don't know, you know. So you've got to be open to learning. So I'll share with you guys. So my last coach was actually from a Canada perspective. So when I got my new portfolio, there's one of our Anglo-American GMC leaders, Richard Price. So he sat with me and he said, Mpumi, you are an African, I'm a Canadian, you are going to be working with my people. So I suggest that the two of us should chat every once in a while, and I'll tell you more about Canadians and what works for Canadians and what doesn't work for Canadians. And I mean, I had absolutely interesting discussions with Richard, because I used to go, Richard, I see that with South Africans you can be more direct, but with Canadians, you need to shape your message in a particular way. And I mean, he was absolutely fantastic, because he'd say, yes, my dear, if you go and you say that to Canadians, believe you me, it will not work. So I'm a firm believer in that. And do I create the time to do it? Yes. I myself would stop learning if I didn't do that with young people. And these days I talk about reciprocal mentorship. And I think you guys should go and pitch to older people and say, you know what, I'm younger, I'm a little bit fresh, and I know other things that you don't know. I can tell you a little bit about how you can show up better on social media, or I can tell you a little bit about how you can engage young people in a manner that resonates with them. And this is what I'd like to learn from you. And as a result, can we agree on a reciprocal mentorship relationship? If I were you, I would definitely do that. If the old people are wise, they will say yes.
Thank you, Mpumi. Just another question on leadership from Notando. She's asking, one of my insecurities has been that I don't come from a geology or mining engineering background. How do you become an effective leader in the mining sector if you do not have that background?
I think that's a great question, and I guess for me there'd be a couple of things around it. So if you don't come from a particular background, I think first and foremost you've got to know that there is a lot that you can learn from individuals that are technically stronger. And I mean, I learned that the hard way at Fort Scoot, because I hadn't really worked in open pit mining, and for the miners, you would know, if you mess up your mine plan, you don't, in a plant, and not that plants are easier, but in a plant, you can most probably go and maybe buy yourself a new crusher. Yes, you'll have a long lead time, and that's what you have to think about. So you can go and talk to somebody that can help you fix it. But in mining, once you start mining out of sequence, it takes you a very long time to get back to that, and you go through pain as you go through that. So I think, for me, I think it would be to say, so firstly, if you're in a space that's not familiar, as a leader, appreciate and be open and honest with yourself with the fact that there are things that you don't know. Seek that out from your team. And when you have the conversation with the team, don't be the leader who wants to pretend as if you know it all. Say to people, I mean, I do it with my team even now. I'll say to my team, Gerry, who heads up our mine at Venetia, and actually Alan, who heads up the project, I'll be like, guys, I have never been involved in a large scale, project of such nature where we are sinking 2 shafts And clearly we are developing that resource to take us to beyond 2040. So guess what? I asked them a lot of questions, and there is nothing wrong with that. So don't try to show up as a person who has the answers that you don't have. Be open and honest, because when you are open and honest with your team, you won't be able to, you won't be trying to compete with them within the technical space, but you'll bring in other leadership qualities, because the people that have put you in that role know why they've put you in that role. And they know that you don't come from the mining space. So they don't expect you to show up as an individual who knows it all from a technical space perspective. So sometimes, to be fair, I think we become, I guess, our worst stumbling blocks, simply because we start thinking that people expect things that frankly they don't expect from us. So if you are more comfortable with yourself, you'll be comfortable saying it. And to be fair, there's nothing wrong with it, because your team will most probably know. But if you pretend, your team will wait for you to exit, and they'll go, but Notando, where did she get this experience? You know, she talks about years and years of experience that we know that she doesn't have. So be authentic as a leader.
Thank you very much. The next question is actually on work-life balance, if I may put it that way. And what I've also come to realize that, especially with working from home, it's a bit challenging to also draw that, to draw that line, because you might end up working longer hours because you're catching up and so on. And this specific question actually comes from Boniswa, and they want to know that, how do you recharge yourself when the going gets tough, and then when there's, uphills?
Thank you so much for that question, Boniswa. I will start by being open and honest with you. I don't think I have mastered the space of work-life balance. And if you talk to my team, we've got a very open relationship. They'll be like, this is a space where I'm continuously learning. Particularly for me at the moment, it's about managing within the two different time zones. So I start my meetings with our Canada team. We've got a meeting once every 2 weeks with some of our stakeholders. And at 6 o'clock, I go, good morning. I think they forget that I'm in South Africa, so they'll be like, good morning, Mpumi. And I'll be like, good morning as well. And clearly, it won't be the morning. I think, to be fair, particularly looking at where we are, that this is an area that requires a lot of focus, particularly for young mothers that are working from home. And I think there's two elements to it, and I'll be open and honest with you. I have not mastered it. It's an area that I continuously work on. But for me, it's been about saying to the team that I don't expect you to do that, So I've got an interesting team. I've got Gloria, who I think is in the call, who will be wanting to have meetings at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I've got team members who will be wanting to have meetings at ridiculous times. And sometimes you just have to say, sorry guys, I can't do it. And what I've learned is that if you as a leader say, and I actually realized it one day, I was at Venetia and we were traveling with our GM and a couple of colleagues, actually now during COVID. And my team in Johannesburg called me for a call, they scheduled the call, and I didn't know about the call. So in the call, I actually said, sorry guys, do we have to talk about this right now? Because I'm actually tired at the moment. And the feedback that I got from each and every single member of the team, and it started with our CFO, Avi, was Avi saying to me, Mpumi, I've never heard you say that you're tired. And I actually reflected on that and thought it was bad, because I was giving an impression to my team that I don't get tired. And as a result, I don't expect them to get tired. And because they know that, I always have energy, maybe they feel that they have to show up as individuals that have to always have energy. So what I've had to learn to do is to actually say to the team, so somebody will say, can we have a meeting on a Saturday? And previously I used to. These days I'll be like, sorry, why do you want us to have a meeting on a Saturday? Monday is around the corner. Like, I expect you to spend time with your family on a Saturday. I want to spend time with my family on a Saturday. And I found that that's assisted with regards to other people doing the same thing as well. So it is an area that all of us need to work on. And I guess what going to work used to do, to the office is you'd wake up, you'd do whatever it is that you need to do at home and then drive to work. And at a particular time, stop working and drive home. And you need to be careful, particularly during this time. You need to find a way of switching off. So how do I switch off? I quite enjoy running. I'm trying to cycle, and I'll underline trying to cycle, because when I cycle with my nephews, they think I'm just terrible. So they'll be like, Auntie Mpumi, why are you so slow? So I'm trying to cycle. And then I actually quite enjoy reading books, but different books on different topics, simply because that stimulates your thinking. And I find that either when I'm running or reading something different, simply because my mind won't be focused on a particular issue, that's when I'll get great ideas about things. I'll be running and I'll be like, shucks, why didn't I think about this before? So I guess the element of switching off and doing something completely different helps you. One, I guess you just, everyone needs to go through that reboot, or you re-energize yourself. But secondly, you give yourself the space to actually think, and not think as in actively, where you actively listen to somebody and you pretend as if you're thinking, but it's where you switch off and you think. And I've learned that there is a difference between the two.
Thank you so much, Mpumi. While you're referring, I'd like to take it back to De Beers. So we're just curious, what policies are in place at De Beers that allow and promote career growth in the organization that you feel other companies can learn from? And just to add another question to that is, how does De Beers ensure that equal opportunities are afforded to all diverse individuals, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's religion or culture? What policies are in place that other companies can learn from?
Thank you so much for that, Refense. So firstly, I'll start with the inclusion and diversity one, and possibly part of the reason why I've enjoyed staying with our company here. One, in September 2017, our global CEO, Bruce Cleaver, went up on a world stage with a female that I admire a lot, Mpumi Zikalala. And as De Beers, he signed us up as he for she thematic champions. So you won't see it, but I've got my pin that, to be fair, I wear all the time. And this was our commitment from an inclusion and diversity perspective. And the starting point for us, and I'll talk about the policy now, was the fact that when you think about diamonds, males buy diamonds, but ultimately most of the people that wear diamonds are females. So if within our own organization, we understood if we didn't have the females, then frankly, we were losing the sense from a customer-based perspective of understanding the ultimate people that wear the product. So for us, it wasn't just about saying, it's the nice thing to do simply because all companies are doing it. It was about saying it is a business imperative. It is a business imperative that we have diversity within the workplace, where you've got different people, different ages, color, gender, whatever it is, simply because the moment when you put different people into the room, they'll all bring different ideas. And research has shown that companies that actually promote diversity, and I'll talk about inclusion now, deliver 15% greater results. So for us, it was about saying, we are not doing this simply because, we're thinking about how we should drive for being a good corporate citizen. That played a part, but it was about saying, let's understand the business imperative, because when you go to miners and you talk about the fact that this is actually the right thing to do from a business perspective, you'll get more buy-in. We then said, but shucks, it's got to start with inclusion. And we talk about inclusion and diversity because inclusion is the culture space. You can put a whole lot of people in one room, But if the culture is not correct, they won't share their thoughts, they won't share their ideas. So frankly, you'll have one dominant voice and you won't fully benefit from inclusion and diversity here, or from the diversity that you have there. So that is when we started working on one. It was about coming up with 3 key targets that apply to each and every single one of us as the entire DBS group, irrespective of where you are. So whether you were mining in Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Canada, or whether you were selling diamonds in the US, India, China, or whether, and this is from a retail perspective, or whether you were selling rough diamonds in Botswana, South Africa, you know, Namibia, or India, or the US, it didn't really matter. It was a common set of objectives where we all said that we target to get to a specific female replacement ratio, particularly for our senior leaders. And where I saw that coming in is, I mean, I look at our ExCo, our group ExCo. When we started on the journey in 2017, there was 1 female within that group ExCo. Where we sit right now, there's 1 more female that's joining us, Sarah, as our group CFO, and that will make it 6 females within that group ExCo. So it was about saying we will set those targets, touching on what we look like internally, the work that we do in our communities, because mining has a huge role insofar as society is concerned. But we also spoke about how we sell diamonds, you know, and the fact that the messages that we had as part of our retail campaigns needed to empower women and not box females into a particular, you know, small little area. So from a policy perspective, we've got policies that define what it is that is expected from an inclusion and diversity perspective. We've taken all our leaders through unconscious bias training. And this was training that was saying that not just from a gender diversity perspective, that all of us have got certain biases, you know, linked to how we may have grown up or our cultures, etc. And we all needed to learn that we all bring those unconscious biases. And by us being aware, it was encouraging all of us to actually be more open. We've also then got, particularly at our operations, we've got our employment equity policies, we've got policies that are specifically touching on the cultural aspects. And I have to say that this is something that is absolutely critical for us. I mean, I can't think about any of our DBS Group ExCo meetings where we didn't talk about inclusion and diversity. And we had to essentially make sure that we resource for it, simply because I think you guys would understand. You can stand up and say, I subscribe to inclusion and diversity, and then give that space just 1 HR individual and, you know, pretend as if you support it. If you truly support it, 1, you'll make sure that the tone is set from your leaders and that you are authentic as you talk about it. You will set those specific targets and you will hold yourself accountable from a performance reporting perspective, simply because when you start measuring things and you start making them more and more visible, then you will essentially start delivering on those things. And then Refensa, coming to the second one, which was around what it is that we do from, the first one around the growth of people, or of young people specifically. So firstly, we believe that we've got to start at a high school level. So we invest a lot in education, particularly with the great focus on STEM-related subjects. And we partner with organizations such as Women, where we go out and we look for those individuals and we promote it. So, you know, I absolutely love Women. I like the team that leads it. You know, I think they are absolutely fantastic. And one of the things that strikes me is that they go to clearly schools and leave the young girls with the pink hard hats. And initially, that was up until I attended one of the sessions, I used to think, you know, why a pink hat? But then I started thinking, for a young girl who's growing up, we're actually encouraging that young girl to look at that pink hat and go, shucks, I want to get into that mining industry one day, hey? And that industry will actually welcome me. So we then essentially, as people start, we've got very clear programs that form part of our, you know, skills development framework. And those cover different fields of study that people would essentially subscribe to. And then key is we also focus on leadership development. And here we segment that. So we look at, you know, leadership development from a supervisory level, leadership development from a middle management level, and leadership development for, call it, various levels. And we believe that if you don't invest in that, unfortunately, it won't just happen by osmosis. So you need to be intentional about it and invest in it. And if I look across the various parts of the business, I mean, I have to say, I mean, I'm very proud of our teams. Exceptionally proud of our team. So when whether you talk about, you know, our teams in Cape Town from a marine mining business, I mean, those guys, if you look at the work that they do, it's absolutely fantastic work. You know, our team at Venetia, absolutely super proud. You know, go to Canada and get the Gachakwe teams, or Gachakwe teams, where when you go there, you get to temperatures of minus 40 degrees Celsius. I'm exceptionally proud of the men and women that work for De Beers, and frankly, am proud of the work that we've been able to do here as a team.
Thank you very much for that response. So I've noticed that we actually run out of time. So what we'll do from my end is that take one last question, and then I'd like to encourage people to still go ahead and ask the questions, but more importantly, that perhaps we use social media to engage further. For example, say LinkedIn. So some of these questions can be posted on LinkedIn, and then we can have a stimulated discussion going forward. So our final question for the day then comes from Inolin, and basically it also follows on the whole discussion on you know, diversity and inclusion. So the question then is, how can one overcome a barrier when one is inundated with constant sexism and sexual harassment as a female in the mine?
Was it Emily or Emilia?
I think it's Enolene.
Oh, Enolene, sorry, Enolene. I think, so firstly, I think it's a great question. And to be fair, one of the areas that I'm extremely passionate about. So when I look at things, I mean, we had a session with our Botswana colleagues. So if you look at our data from a South African perspective, and you look at the things that especially females go through, I have to say it's one of the things that we all need to work around. And let me also be open and honest, there are males that go through the same things as well. And I mean, I pull all of it under the element of abuse, because frankly, it's something that should not be happening. And it's something that I guess compromises you as an individual, and you start thinking about other various things instead of similar to everybody else, simply because clearly, ultimately, we want to drive for an equal society, you know, and everybody else should be focusing on competing on equal terms. So my feedback would be to say, if you look at the broader society right now, everyone's talking about gender-based violence and the fact that it needs to be stopped. And companies who today do not have, and I know that we have from a DBS perspective, policies that deal specifically with bullying and harassment, then are not doing the right thing. And the first one that I would say, and it's to myself as a leader and all the other leaders that work within the mining industry, is that from a Minerals Council perspective, you guys may know that last week we had the day, and it was, I guess, the first time we've ever sat together as an industry and had a day where we were engaging from a women in mining perspective. And all of us committed to certain things. And part of that was the fact that we will work on creating a culture that promotes inclusion. And clearly, when you start talking about bullying and harassment, that does not form part of the kind of culture that we need to build. So the first one is, I would encourage you to engage your senior leaders around sorting out those systemic issues, because that's where it has to start. It starts with leadership being very clear on what it is that it stands for, insofar as the, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, insofar as the workspace is concerned. And I can say, I talk to most of the other CEOs from a Minerals Council perspective, that we've sat from a council perspective, and we've all agreed that we will actually work on ruling out gender-based violence, and that we will work on the cultural elements. So assuming that that is in place, mine would be to say, please don't keep quiet. Don't think that because it is, my line leader or, my line leader twice removed, I have to keep quiet simply because I've got to subject myself to this. Please don't do that. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to your family. And frankly, it's not going to help you. So don't keep quiet. Utilize, whether you speak to your HR team or you speak to another leader, or most companies have actually got a speak up line, call that line and report. Simply because the only way we will essentially fix the cultural elements that are linked to systemic issues is where females do not keep quiet. If you don't, so please do it for yourself, or just think about other people that will come after you and do it for them. But take a stand. Don't keep quiet. I can definitely tell you that knowing the other leaders that we sit with from a Minerals Council perspective, we've all said that we will do the right thing. So I'd like to hope that irrespective of which company it is, we would choose to do the right thing. I can tell you what would happen from a DBS perspective. If somebody did that to one of our females, they wouldn't work for us for way longer, because that is something that is not tolerated. We don't have the space for that at any corner of our business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mpumi, for all your insights, and we really appreciate your time. More than anything, as a female engineer as well, just trying to maneuver my way through the industry, I leave you with a quote by Maya Angelou saying that you make me so proud to spell my name WOMAN. And we really appreciate women like yourself who are present in this industry and continue being in the industry, because I think it does get hard. And Wesley's last question is a question that I think at some point all of us have experienced, and we never know how to deal with it. But when we see women like yourself progressing in the industry, it is some form of hope, and we really, really appreciate your hard work and all the changes that you're making at the seat, when you have at tables where you have a seat. And today's conversation was very encouraging. I'd like to also take an opportunity to thank SAIMM as well as WIMSA in collaboration with WIMSA for this opportunity actually to have these conversations, because these dialogues are the things that motivate us and actually stir the change we need. And we like to also thank Implants for being part of this platform. And yes, thank you so much to the team that organized everything. We really appreciate all your hard work, and again for keeping platforms like SAIMM alive, for us to actually know that we have a place to go to when we don't know we don't have all the answers, or we don't know what we're doing in our careers, but there's always a platform where we can network with other individuals such as ourselves. And lastly, I'd like to thank all the participants who were involved in the conversation and the dialogue. Thank you so much for all the questions. Like Wesley mentioned, in the interest of time, we were not able to get through all the questions, but we'll take this to social media. So if you're not following SAIMM on LinkedIn, please follow them, and just we'll continue the conversation and the dialogue there. I hand over to Prof. Silo to just round off the conversation.
Thank you, Refense. I don't think I need to say anything because you've actually said everything. You've just taken the words from my mouth. Really, thank you, Mpumi. You were so inspirational in your talk, and I think a lot of people identified with your story through, and I see the questions that came through. I mean, there were quite a lot of questions, and there's still quite a lot. And I think, as Wesley was said, we can still continue this discussion further on. And I really thank you. I'm sure you are a very, very busy person, and I thank you that you actually took this time to come and talk and inspire people, the young professionals, especially that are in this industry. I mean, even the older people that are in the industry, like some of us, we're really inspired, and we really identified with your story, and we learned a lot from you. So we really, really appreciate it. And I would also like to take this opportunity to also thank the DIMI committee, the one that was organizing, the chairperson of the committee, and I thank also the committee members who worked together to bring this to fruition. So, but above all, really, I want to thank the participants. They were really great, and there were quite so many beautiful comments that came through, thanking you, Mpumi, and for your story, and that they were very inspired by your talk. Quite a lot of positive comments. So we cannot really thank you enough. I think we really learned a lot today. So thank you so much, and I hope next time when we ask you again to come and give a talk, you'll be happy to come and join us.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the questions. And I'll end off by saying, I don't think it's about me. It's all the wonderful men and women of De Beers. And I saw one of the names popping out a little bit earlier, Potsett, one of our senior leaders from a Venetia perspective. And I guess that's what makes me proud. It's the wonderful work that's done by the team. So thank you.
So yes, then thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again next week. We have got our last talk for the month on this series where we'll be talking. I saw there were quite a lot of questions about inner fears, how do you overcome mental barriers and things like that. Our talk next week will be focused on how to overcome your inner fears. So those that questions which were not answered, hoping that you can join us again next week for our last talk of the month. Thank you so much. See you again next week on Tuesday, same time.